This week we're working on chapter 5 about job-based structures and job evaluation. I'm only going to make 2 videos this week. As you can probably hear, I have a little bit of laryngitis. So I'm going to try my best to talk through these videos. But if you have any questions, the book has a lot of details that I won't be covering in the videos, but I'm also happy to answer your questions on email, especially if you can't hear me very well because of my laryngitis. So we're going to talk about job-based structures and job evaluation this week. We'll talk about person-based structures in a future chapter, either next week or the week after. Um, Most organizations use both. So we're going to learn them as separate ways to make an internal structure. But remember that most organizations, including where I work and the way that my job is even set up, is usually a combination of job and person-based structures. So what is job evaluation? This is kind of the basis of creating a job-based internal structure, and it's the process of systematically determining the relative worth of jobs to create the organization's job structure. And when we do a job evaluation, it's a little bit like a job analysis, but a job analysis, the outcome is the job description. The job evaluation, the outcome is actually this internal structure that you're creating for your organization's compensation structure. So what we're going to focus on to create that compensation structure is what we value in those jobs. And that can be different across different organizations based on the organization's strategy and the way that it wants to compete with other companies in its industry. We have to figure out how we want to assess the value for those jobs, and then how we can translate that value into some kind of job-based structure that describes the value of all the jobs in our organization. So job evaluation can be based on the content of the job or the value of the job. When it's based on job content, it's looking at what work is performed and how it gets done. That's what the job analysis that we talked about last week does for us. It gives us a description for every job of what the duties are in that job and how that job fits in with the workflow within the organization. Job content matters when we're doing a job evaluation, but it's often not the only basis for pay. A lot of times, and most of you will have encountered this already with jobs you've had or jobs that you will get after you graduate. Job value is also really important to figuring out how much you're going to pay your employees for different kinds of jobs. Job value is based on the value of that job in the external market. So what are other organizations in that particular industry paying for that job? You can't, even if you have your own internal structure based on job content, even if you think a job's not worth as much for the strategy that your organization has, it's going to be very hard for you to attract or keep employees if you're paying under market compared to other organizations and you don't have something to supplement that with like better benefits or more flexibility or more job training. Because what people who are looking for a job are looking at is the pay across different kinds of jobs in different organizations. So that external market still really matters. So we have 5 major decisions that we have to make in job evaluation. First, we have to establish the purpose of our evaluation. Here, we're going to talk about creating an internal compensation structure for our organization. This is just like job analysis. If you don't know the purpose of your evaluation, it's going to be hard to make decisions later in the process because it won't be clear what the purpose is, and then you won't be able to make decisions that are related to one single purpose for that particular job evaluation. Your second decision is to decide if you want to use a single plan for all the jobs in your organization, or if you need to use multiple plans because you have lots of different kinds of jobs, or you just have a lot of jobs in your organization, so one plan doesn't make sense. Your third decision is you're going to choose among alternative approaches, and the second video is going to get into more depth on those alternative approaches that we can use for doing job evaluations. And then we're going to obtain involvement of relevant stakeholders. I'm not going to go into that in much depth here on the videos, but it is in the book. Essentially, you want to have really important stakeholders like managers and the employees who work in the jobs that you're evaluating to be part of the process because you need them to buy into it. But you may have other stakeholders like union representatives as well that might need to be involved in the process. And then once you have your plan, you have to evaluate the usefulness. Does it make sense the way that people's pay is organized, that some people are paid more than others? Is it justifiable? Do you get the buy-in from your stakeholders, or are there questions about how this plan was made that you might need to go back and kind of adjust the way that you made the plan? So let's go through some of these major decisions. The first decision is to establish your purpose. And for us in this class, that the purpose of the job evaluation is establishing an internally aligned pay structure. That pay structure has to support our organizational strategy, and we have to define how each job that we're evaluating adds value and adds to that organizational strategy. How does it contribute to that organization's strategy? The evaluation has to support workflow. We have to be able to integrate pay with each job's contributions in that workflow to meet our strategic objectives in our organization. And this also helps us then in the future when we have new jobs or jobs are changing, which they constantly are in a lot of workplaces. Instead of having to do a job evaluation over again every time we have a new job, or we need to change job descriptions, we have to update job descriptions from our job analysis, we can just use the job evaluation we already have and integrate those new jobs or those changed job descriptions into that structure that already exists. We want a job evaluation that's fair to employees, and that's why we include a lot of stakeholders in making decisions around the job evaluation. And then we also want the job evaluation to motivate behavior toward organizational objectives. Essentially, we want to make sure that our internal structure is paying for the kinds of behaviors that we want our employees to do to meet the objectives and the strategy that the organization has. That means you don't want to be paying for things that could be counter to your strategy, or that your strategy actually says are not very important. So you're not going to pay more for things that are not important or don't add value to to meeting the strategic objectives of the organization. The second decision is choosing a single versus a multiple plan. A single plan would mean that you have one way of evaluating all jobs, and then you're going to have like compensable factors, for example, and then you're going to apply all of them to all the jobs you have, instead of having multiple plans where you might have one plan for management, for example, a different plan for administrative assistants, a different plan for the people who do the main work, like manufacturing. People who are working in manufacturing or factories, or professionals like engineers who are creating things. So you can create different evaluation plans for different kinds of work. And for a lot of you, if you have to do this as part of your job, you likely will have different plans because your workplace is likely big enough that you have a lot of different kinds of jobs, and one plan just doesn't make sense for all the different kinds of jobs. What you'll start with is a sample of benchmark or key jobs. Benchmark jobs are just jobs that you've selected throughout your organization that kind of represent the kinds of different jobs that you have, either for that single or for each of the multiple plans that you'll have. A benchmark job's contents are very well known and they're very stable. So something like my job where I teach, for example, a benchmark job could be a professor, like an assistant professor. That's what my position is. That's a well-known and stable job. Many universities have that job. There are lots of people who work in those jobs as well. So it's common across lots of different universities and colleges. And then there's thousands or hundreds of thousands of people with this job. So you have a lot of information then to compare across different organizations. When we're thinking about picking benchmark jobs, we have to think about the diversity of the work in the organization we're in. So we can have diversity in terms of depth, which is vertical. So the fact that I'm an assistant professor and the person who's my supervisor is the chair of our department, he has a different job title and different responsibilities. He oversees lots of employees in my department. He does some teaching. He may do some of the parts of my job, but he has other responsibilities. You can also have differences in terms of breadth. So there are lots of different people, and this is part of your discussion board this week, who do teaching at Kansas State. So even within my department, I do teaching and research as part of my job, but there are other people called instructors who all they do is teaching. They don't have to do the research part of their job, but we're both teaching. So the breadth of their job is a little bit different from mine. They do more teaching because they have other things that are not part of their job. The number of plans that you want to have, if you're going to have multiple plans, will depend on how detailed your evaluation has to be. And that's part of that. What is the original purpose of this job evaluation? Because the more detailed you have, the more it will cost, the more time it will take, and the more resources you'll need. But it could be much more informative for stakeholders when you're done. And it might even be easier to tweak as you add new jobs, because you may have just a lot of description there about how you're going to evaluate jobs in your organization and how the internal structure is created. The third thing is that you want to choose among your job evaluation methods, and the next video will go into more depth on what those methods are. But for most organizations, and this is becoming more so as time goes on, market pricing is their primary method of job evaluation. Essentially, what they do is they have some benchmark jobs, they look out to other organizations, they get pay reports, and they find out what other organizations are paying, and that's what they end up paying, or they want to beat that other organizations pay for those same jobs. It de-emphasizes internal equity, so it could mean that some people are getting paid a lot more than other people are, and it may not make sense, but it's all because of what the external market will pay for those jobs. However, 1 in 4 organizations still uses traditional job evaluation as their primary method, which means for those of you who will be working HR, it's very likely you will do this at some point in your career, especially if you work in compensation specifically. And it's very likely that even if only 1 in 4 use it as their primary method, most organizations probably use job evaluation at some level. Even if they use market pricing as their primary way of creating their their structure in their organization for compensation. And many times it's because you might have these benchmark jobs, but there may be jobs in your organization that don't match jobs in other organizations. They're very unique and different. And so it's not completely clear then what your external price should be, or what the market price is for that job. And so you have to do a job evaluation and have some bit of internal structure to start figuring out what those jobs that are unique to your organization, how much they should compensate the employees in those positions.